My name is Jessica, and I'm about to tell you how my older sister, the woman I trusted to care for our ailing mother while I worked across the country, systematically drained Mom's life savings under the guise of medical expenses. What I believed was selfless devotion to family turned out to be the most calculated financial manipulation I never saw coming, executed by someone who had been positioning herself for this opportunity for years. I should have questioned things when Rebecca suddenly became the most attentive daughter in the world. For 20 years, she'd barely called Mom except when she needed money. Rebecca was the family's perpetual crisis: failed marriages, maxed out credit cards, and a pattern of asking for emergency loans that were never repaid. When Mom's dementia diagnosis came in, I naturally assumed I'd be flying back from Portland every few weeks to handle her care, while Rebecca continued her usual pattern of avoidance. Instead, Rebecca surprised everyone by volunteering to move in with Mom full-time. "Jess, you've got that big promotion and your kids are finally settled in their new schools," she said during our tearful family conference call about Mom's care options. "I'm between relationships anyway, and you know how Mom gets confused with strangers. She needs family around her, not some aide who doesn't understand her quirks." Her concern seemed genuine, even touching. Here was my irresponsible older sister finally stepping up when our family needed her most. Rebecca had always been charming and persuasive, traits that had gotten her into trouble with men and money, but now seemed perfectly suited for caregiving. "Are you sure you can handle this?" I asked, feeling guilty for even questioning her offer. "It's going to be a lot of work, and you know how stubborn Mom can be about taking her medications." "She raised us, didn't she?" Rebecca replied with that warm laugh I remembered from childhood. "Besides, someone has to keep her from reorganizing the kitchen cabinets at 3 in the morning. Might as well be me." I was so relieved to have the caregiving situation resolved that I didn't think to ask the obvious question: what was Rebecca planning to live on while providing full-time care? The answer, I would later discover, was Mom's bank accounts. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. Rebecca sent regular updates about Mom's condition, photos of them baking cookies together, and cheerful reports about doctor's appointments. Mom seemed happier and more lucid during our weekly video calls, often mentioning how grateful she was to have Rebecca there. "She's such a good daughter," Mom would say, her eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "She makes sure I take my pills and helps me remember where I put things. I don't know what I'd do without her." Rebecca had always been Mom's favorite, though she'd never admit it. Where I was practical and responsible, Rebecca was spontaneous and affectionate. She remembered birthdays with elaborate gifts, told funny stories at family gatherings, and had a way of making Mom feel special and appreciated. But slowly, concerning details started emerging in our conversations. During one of our video calls, Mom mentioned casually that they'd had to dip into savings for some unexpected medical expenses. When I asked for details, Mom looked confused and said she couldn't remember exactly what the expenses were for. "Rebecca handles all that now," Mom said with a dismissive wave. "She's so much better with numbers than I ever was." This was the first red flag. Mom had always been meticulous about her finances, keeping detailed records of every expense. She'd raised 2 daughters as a single mother after Dad died, and careful money management had been essential to our survival. The idea that she would let anyone else handle her finances without maintaining her own records was completely out of character. When I asked Rebecca about the medical expenses, her explanation seemed reasonable but vague. "You know how Medicare works," she said during our next phone call. "There are all these copays and deductibles, plus Mom needed some equipment that wasn't covered. The walker, the shower chair, some monitoring devices the doctor recommended. It adds up quickly." "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "Oh, maybe 2 or 3,000 so far. Nothing major, but you know how Mom worries about money." I didn't want to stress her out with all the paperwork and insurance claims. The amount seemed reasonable for medical expenses, and Rebecca's protective attitude toward Mom's stress levels made sense. I sent a check for $1,500 to help cover the costs and didn't think much more about it. That was my first mistake. Over the next 6 months, the unexpected medical expenses became a regular theme in our conversations. Physical therapy, not covered by insurance. Prescription medications mom's doctor had switched her to. Home modifications recommended by an occupational therapist. Each expense sounded legitimate and necessary, and the amounts were never so large as to seem alarming, but they were constant. I hate to keep bothering you about this, Rebecca would say, but Mom's so proud to ask for help. She keeps saying she doesn't want to be a burden, especially when you're working so hard to support your own family. The guilt trips were subtle but effective. Rebecca knew exactly how to make me feel like a neglectful daughter for living across the country while she sacrificed everything to care for our mother. I was sending $500 to $1,000 every month to help with Mom's care, believing I was contributing to legitimate medical expenses while my sister provided the hands-on caregiving I couldn't manage from Portland. The truth was much worse than I could have imagined. The first crack in Rebecca's perfect facade appeared during a routine conversation with Mom's longtime neighbor, Mrs. Chun. I'd called to ask her to check on Mom and Rebecca during a particularly bad winter storm that had knocked out power in their neighborhood. "Oh, honey, they're fine," Mrs. Chun assured me. "Though I have to say, your sister's been having quite a few visitors lately. Different cars in the driveway most nights, if you know what I mean." I didn't know what she meant, but something about her tone made me uncomfortable. "Visitors?" I asked carefully. "Well, it's none of my business," Mrs. Chin said in the tone that meant she was definitely going to make it her business. "But there's been a lot of social activity over there. Music, laughter, people coming and going at all hours. I suppose everyone grieves differently, but it seems like your sister's coping quite well with the stress of caregiving." My stomach dropped. Rebecca had been telling me how isolated and exhausted she was from caring for Mom around the clock. She described their quiet routine of watching old movies together, doing puzzles, and having peaceful early bedtimes. "Has Mom seemed okay when you've seen her?" I asked. There was a pause. "Well, I haven't actually seen your mother in quite a while. Your sister says she's having a difficult time and needs to avoid overstimulation. Very understandable, of course, given her condition." After hanging up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That evening, I tried calling Mom directly on her landline instead of going through Rebecca's cell phone as I usually did. Mom answered on the first ring, sounding more alert and coherent than she had in months. "Jessica, what a lovely surprise. Rebecca said you were too busy with work to call much anymore." My blood ran cold. "Mom, we talk every Sunday. We just talked 2 days ago." "Did we?" Mom sounded genuinely confused. "I don't remember that. Rebecca said you'd been traveling for work and couldn't keep up with the regular calls." "Mom, where is Rebecca right now?" "Oh, she went out with some friends. She said you'd approved it, that you thought she deserved a break from taking care of me all the time." I'd never told Rebecca any such thing. In fact, I'd been under the impression that she rarely left Mom alone, which was why I'd been so grateful for her constant presence. "How often does Rebecca go out, Mom?" "Oh, quite a bit lately. She says young people need social time and that you understand she can't be expected to stay home with me every night." The conversation revealed a pattern I'd been completely unaware of. Rebecca had been telling Mom that I approved of her frequent absences, while telling me that she was providing round-the-clock care. She'd been using my supposed permission as justification for a social life that was entirely inconsistent with the sacrificial caregiving role she'd claimed to be fulfilling, but the worst revelations were still to come. Over the next week, I made several unexpected calls to Mom's landline at different times of day. Each conversation revealed more troubling details about Rebecca's actual caregiving routine. Mom was often alone for hours at a time, sometimes forgetting to eat meals because Rebecca wasn't there to remind her. She'd been taking her medications inconsistently because Rebecca would sometimes forget to set them out before leaving. Most alarming, Mom mentioned several times that Rebecca had been helping her with financial tasks that Mom couldn't remember agreeing to. "She's so good with computers," Mom said during one call. "She's been helping me set up online banking and automatic payments for all my bills. I never could figure out that technology stuff." This was my second major red flag. Mom had been adamantly opposed to online banking her entire life, insisting that she preferred to write checks and keep paper records of everything. The idea that she would suddenly embrace automatic electronic payments was completely out of character. When I asked to speak with Rebecca about Mom's care routine, she was always unavailable, at a doctor's appointment with Mom, running errands, or dealing with some medical emergency that required her immediate attention. But when I called Mom directly, she was usually alone and had no knowledge of any medical appointments or emergencies. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Rebecca was lying to both Mom and me about almost everything. That I decided to make an unannounced visit home, that I told my boss I had a family emergency and booked a flight to Minneapolis without telling either Mom or Rebecca I was coming. My plan was to arrive on a Saturday morning and see for myself what was really happening in Mom's house. What I found was worse than my worst suspicions. I used my key to let myself into Mom's house at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, expecting to find Rebecca helping Mom with breakfast and morning medications. Instead, I found Mom sitting alone in her pajamas in the living room, looking confused and neglected. "Jessica," she said with genuine surprise and joy. "What are you doing here? Rebecca said you were too busy to visit until Christmas." It was February. "Where is Rebecca, Mom?" "I think she's still sleeping. She had friends over last night, and they were up quite late. I went to bed early because the music was so loud." I walked upstairs and found Rebecca's room empty, with clear signs that she hadn't been home all night. The bed was unmade, but didn't look slept in, and her clothes from the previous day were still laid out on the chair. When I checked Mom's bedroom, I found something that made my heart stop: a pile of open mail on her dresser, including bank statements that showed dozens of electronic withdrawals and transfers I knew Mom hadn't authorized. Rebecca had been systematically draining Mom's accounts for months. The bank statements revealed a pattern of increasingly bold theft. It had started small, $200 here, $300 there, always with electronic transfers that would be harder for Mom to track than missing checks. But over time, the amounts had grown larger and more frequent. And the past month alone, Rebecca had transferred over $8,000 from Mom's savings account to accounts I didn't recognize. I spent the morning going through every piece of financial paperwork I could find. The full scope of Rebecca's theft was staggering. She'd opened credit cards in Mom's name, set up automatic payments from Mom's checking account to cover her own expenses, and even taken out a home equity loan against Mom's house. The most damning evidence was a folder hidden in Rebecca's room containing printouts of Mom's online banking accounts, complete with passwords and account numbers written in Rebecca's handwriting. She'd been planning this theft for months, systematically gaining access to every aspect of Mom's financial life while positioning herself as the devoted caregiver who was sacrificing everything for family. When Rebecca finally returned home at 11 a.m., clearly hungover and wearing the same clothes from the night before, she found me sitting at Mom's kitchen table with bank statements spread out in front of me. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, fear, and finally, defiance. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, as if I was the one who shouldn't be in our mother's house. "I'm here because I was worried about Mom," I said calmly. "And it turns out I was right to be worried." I gestured to the bank statements. "Want to explain these?" Rebecca's response was immediate and predictable: deflection and manipulation. "You have no idea how expensive Mom's care is," she said, dropping into a chair with dramatic exhaustion. "I've been spending my own money to cover things insurance won't pay for." Those transfers were reimbursements for out-of-pocket expenses. $8,000 in 1 month. "There was a medical emergency you don't know about," Mom fell and needed some tests that weren't covered. Plus, there were medications, equipment, home health aid visits. What medical emergency? I interrupted. What fall? When did this happen? Rebecca's story began to fall apart immediately. She couldn't provide details about the alleged fall, couldn't remember which tests had been done, and couldn't explain why none of this had been mentioned in our regular phone calls. "You're never here," she said, switching tactics. "You have no idea what I've been dealing with while you're living your perfect life in Portland. Do you know how hard it is to watch Mom deteriorate every day? Do you know what I've sacrificed to take care of her? I know you've sacrificed Mom's financial security for your social life," I replied. That's when Rebecca's mask finally came off completely. "She's going to die anyway," Rebecca said with shocking coldness. "She doesn't even remember what money she has or doesn't have. At least I'm putting it to good use instead of letting it sit in some bank account she'll never touch again." The casual cruelty of her logic was breathtaking. She'd convinced herself that stealing from our confused, vulnerable mother was somehow justified because Mom wouldn't live long enough to miss the money. "And what was your plan when the money ran out?" I asked. Rebecca shrugged. "Medicaid would have covered her care. State programs exist for people without assets." Her plan had been to spend Mom's life savings on herself, then let the government pay for Mom's care after she'd artificially created the financial need for assistance. "You've stolen over $40,000, I said, calculating quickly from the bank statements. "I've invested in Mom's care and my future," Rebecca corrected. Someone had to think practically about this situation. The conversation ended when I told Rebecca I was calling the police and an elder abuse hotline. Her response was to grab her purse and leave, claiming she was the victim of an ungrateful family who didn't appreciate her sacrifices. She didn't return to Mom's house, leaving me to begin the complicated process of undoing months of financial fraud while caring for a confused mother who didn't understand why her trusted daughter had suddenly disappeared. The legal and financial recovery process took nearly 2 years. Rebecca had been more thorough than I'd initially realized, creating a web of forged documents, fake expenses, and identity theft that required forensic accountants and elder abuse investigators to fully unravel. In total, she'd stolen over $65,000 in cash and charged another $23,000 to credit cards opened in Mom's name. She'd also used Mom's social security number to open utility accounts and even tried to refinance Mom's house, though fortunately that scheme had been rejected by the mortgage company due to inconsistencies in the paperwork. Rebecca was eventually charged with elder abuse, identity theft, and multiple counts of fraud. She accepted a plea bargain that included 3 years in prison and full restitution, though the restitution order was largely meaningless since she'd already spent all the stolen money and had no assets to seize. During the investigation, I learned that Rebecca's caregiving had been even more negligent than I'd realized. Mom had missed multiple doctor's appointments because Rebecca was too busy to take her. Prescriptions had gone unfilled for weeks at a time. Mom had lost 15 pounds because Rebecca frequently forgot to buy groceries or prepare meals. The devoted caregiving that had made me feel so guilty for living across the country had been a complete fiction. Rebecca had been using Mom's house as a base for her social life while providing minimal actual care. Mom's condition deteriorated rapidly once the stress and neglect of Rebecca's care was removed. With proper medical attention and nutrition, she stabilized somewhat, but the months of inconsistent medication and poor care had taken a permanent toll that I moved Mom to an excellent memory care facility near my home in Portland, where she received the professional, consistent care that Rebecca had claimed to be providing. The irony was that the cost of professional care was less than what Rebecca had been stealing each month for her personal expenses. Mom lived for another 3 years after Rebecca's arrest. Her dementia progressed, but she was comfortable, safe, and properly cared for. In her clearer moments, she would sometimes ask about Rebecca, and I would tell her that Rebecca was traveling and would visit when she could. I never told Mom the truth about what Rebecca had done. There was no point in adding that betrayal and hurt to the confusion she was already experiencing. Rebecca sent letters from prison, initially full of rage about being persecuted for trying to help our family. Later, the letters became more manipulative, claiming she'd made mistakes but had always meant well, and asking for money for her commissary account. I never responded to any of the letters. Rebecca was released after serving 2 years of her sentence. She contacted me once, asking for help getting back on her feet, and claiming she'd learned valuable lessons about financial responsibility. I told her that the most valuable lesson she could learn was that actions have consequences, and that some betrayals are unforgivable. She moved to another state and, as far as I know, has had no contact with any remaining family members. When Mom died peacefully in her sleep at the memory care facility, surrounded by professional caregivers who genuinely cared about her well-being, I held a small memorial service. Several of her friends from the facility attended, along with neighbors from her old house who remembered her fondly. Rebecca was not invited and did not attend. The hardest part of this entire experience wasn't the financial theft. Insurance and legal remedies eventually recovered most of the stolen money. The hardest part is realizing that while I'd been working hard to support my own family and contributing what I thought was my fair share to Mom's care, my sister had been systematically abusing and robbing the woman who'd raised us both. I'd spent months feeling guilty for not being able to provide hands-on care while Rebecca made such sacrifices for our family. The truth was that Rebecca's sacrifices had all been fictional, and Mom had been suffering neglect and theft while I sent money to support what I thought was devoted caregiving. Today, I work with elder abuse prevention organizations, sharing Mom's story to help other families recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation by trusted family members. The patterns are always similar. The devoted family member who suddenly becomes interested in caregiving, the gradual isolation of the vulnerable person from other family members, and the steady stream of mysterious medical expenses that never quite add up. The saddest part of these cases is that the perpetrators are usually the family members who are most trusted, most beloved, and most capable of manipulating both the victim and other family members who might otherwise provide oversight. Rebecca taught me that the people closest to us are often in the best position to harm us if they choose to. She also taught me that genuine love and care are demonstrated through consistency, transparency, and respect for the other person's dignity and autonomy. Stealing from a confused, vulnerable parent while claiming to care for them is the opposite of love, no matter how it's rationalized or justified. Mom deserved better than what Rebecca gave her, but in the end, she received the care and respect she'd earned through a lifetime of putting her daughters first. That care just came from professional caregivers instead of the daughter she'd trusted most. Sometimes the family you choose, even if they're paid professionals, provides more genuine care than the family you're born with.